right, my friends, you're in a toxic job, you have Qs, I have As, and I brought a friend with me to help you today as well. So today we are going to be talking about toxic workplace troubleshooting. So I have gotten a few stories, a few questions in from some of you in advance of today's live stream, but even more exciting is that I'm not here alone because I'm sure my opinions are great and everything. You guys are used to hearing them all the time. But I brought a friend along who is a fellow career strategist, fellow toxic workplace survivor, and someone with a lot of really awesome opinions that I knew that you would want to hear. So I'm just going to get right to it and bring Mindy up on screen with me.
All right.
Thank you for joining me, Mindy.
Well, happy Thursday. Excited to be talking about toxic work environments and what we can do to work our way out of them.
Yes. And I know it's like such an uplifting topic of conversation naturally, but what I love about talking with you about this is that you bring kind of the same attitude towards it that I do, where it's like, okay, yes, it's super serious, but maybe we can have a little bit of a lighthearted, sometimes funny conversation about it, because I know that your opinions go in. We've snarked before on another show. So
we definitely snarked about it. And I think it is important to keep your sense of humor about you at all times, because of course there are certain things that you have control over and certain things you do have not, but you can always laugh at something.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, and when you're in a toxic workplace, and I think even just when you're getting to like the coping after, is like humor can be a really good way of actually processing things. And that sometimes if we just take things a little bit less serious, they impact us a little less, because I think that that's something that's actually really hard when you are in the middle of a toxic workplace, because everything is just kind of toxic and annoying.
And it's so hard to remember that things are going to change, that it isn't going to stay like this forever. And, I'm a big reader, and I've been reading Octavia Butler and her, one of her series she talks about change and how one of the characters creates a religion centered around change, and how change is the only constant. It is the only thing that can be counted on. And so, you may be in a toxic work environment right now, but this will change, whether by your own momentum or other things. So, let's just hold on to that change and talk about how we can make that happen.
Absolutely. So I see that people are joining in now. So hello and welcome to everyone who is just joining the live. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in. I won't be putting people on screen if they have questions, just because I don't want to broadcast that necessarily on the internet, even though obviously the comments are there. I just know that there's going to be maybe different levels of comfort. But if you are just saying hello, like our friend Usama, then I'm going to say hello.
Hello, and I see you, Kiko and Michael. And Michael wants to know about your Facebook.
So I do have a Facebook profile, but it is not in use. LinkedIn is my home, and YouTube, obviously. So that's like the best places to find me. And hey, Chris is here as well. Awesome. Cool. Nice to see some friendly faces. Okay. So let's just get straight into it, because yesterday? I don't even have any concept of days anymore. So I did post and I did ask for some stories, and I got a couple that I wanted to talk to you about. So I asked to send in stories or send in questions just to get different takes. So the first one I thought was really interesting, and especially with your and actually first, for anyone who doesn't know you, Mindy, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, like the short version?
I have been in recruiting for 22 years, specifically in marketing, advertising, product, and design. And probably much like yourself, at a certain point, realized that people were having the same issue over and over again. Baseline, we'll call it not being able to find a fit. And of course, toxicity issues or environmental issues playing into that hugely. But I love to help people find out what does work for them and why, and kind of take them down that rabbit hole and pathway.
Awesome. Well, I am super excited. And your background and your superpower is perfectly aligned with this first question. So the first question that I got was from a toxic workplace survivor. And they asked, how can you see red flags during the interview process to ensure that you don't get trapped in another toxic workplace? Is there suggested questions that they should be asking? And they're trying to, integrate this into their job search as they look for a non-toxic job.
That's a great question. And yes, you should just overall in interviews, you should have a list of questions that you are asking back. And several of those are testers, right? For how it's going over there. And of course, we want to politely, but still get in there with people, right? So there's a couple ways you can go about that. I like to kind of sneakily and gently get in there with people and say, hey, person who's working there, you've been at this company for a while. Please tell me 3 things that you love about your job, right? Yeah. Now, if they're struggling to find 3, that'll tell you something, but hopefully they may also tell you 3 things that tell you good things. And they say, great, tell me 3 things that you would fix if it was under your purview to do so. Now they're really going to let it all come out. Right? And you are going to get some info out of them, and they don't necessarily know what you're going at there. And you do have a higher likelihood of them kind of spilling the beans. You can also ask things point blank. Hey, why is this position open? What are your biggest challenges with this position? What are your 3-month goals, your 6-month goals, your 9-month goals? And if people can't clearly say to you what they're trying to do and what the problems are or what their goals are, that may also indicate to you messiness or that management isn't together on a vision. But yeah, there's definitely some questions you can get in there that'll start spilling the beans a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I have worked with people that were aware that the work environment wasn't necessarily great. So they knew not to tell people. But that's where I think also your research prep or like your interview prep really comes in, because you're not just preparing to present yourself as an awesome candidate, which is obviously important. Put your best foot forward. Assume that it's not a toxic company, but also you are trying to figure out if this is the right next step for you. So sites like Glassdoor, and especially when it gets to an offer stage, like I'm such an advocate of contacting former employees, like using tools like LinkedIn.
Yes. I love that too. Now, just keep in mind though, with Glassdoor and with previous employees, depending on their situation and how they left, you might just get a big bag of bitter. So, take it with a grain of salt.
And that's kind of like the balance that I think you have to feel out, because if someone is willing to sing praises or the opposite of praise, I can't think of the word off the top of my head, just like tell you what a nightmare it is. Like if that person, in fairness, that person was maybe terrible at their job and was fired and isn't very happy about it, or it just was a really terrible fit, whereas you would be a really great fit, because there's going to be a lot that you don't know about that person. And actually, I hope I'm saying her name correctly. So Yukio had actually commented on another YouTube video, I think, or was it on LinkedIn? I saw it somewhere, but she said quitting without another job is a particular sign of a toxic workplace. So I liked this as a red flag. So she actually goes through on LinkedIn to find profiles of former employees to see how often it is that they're leaving the company without having another job. And that I thought was a really clever way to spot a red flag, because if you see a lot of attrition where people aren't bouncing to other opportunities, which is totally normal and expected, but if it's at a high rate, that either tells you that people are voluntarily leaving regularly, or the company is laying people off or eliminating them regularly. So I thought that was a good thing to check for as well. And particularly if you are in an industry where LinkedIn is prevalent, which I know not everyone in YouTube is, I really liked that tip, because it's a nice passive way of doing it. And then you could actually reach out to someone as well, especially if you have any mutual connections or anything like that.
Oh yeah, always do your homework. I bet you 9 times out of 10, you know someone who knows someone. So it is a little bit of time, but let's face it, there's no amount of time that's not a good investment to keep you out of a toxic work environment or a job that won't work for you. So doing this research on the front end will really save you a lot of heartache on the back. I mean, I know it's work, and a lot of people are like, oh, more work on my job search, but like, how important is it to you to land somewhere happy?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Or
I
that
see.
person
So
might be
some,
working out somewhere cool. New relationship.
absolutely. And we're always down for making new friends. A good story came in on YouTube. And again, I'm not going to put it up and I'm not going to say anyone's name just because. But this person said, I used to work in a very toxic work environment in a foreign country, facing many challenges at once. I tried as hard as I could to get along with coworkers and boss, but they ended up being let go. And this is something that has actually come up a few times on some of my recent LinkedIn posts, is that especially when you've moved and you're kind of bound to the employer because of visa reasons. Like, how does one navigate that? Because, I'm very open. And Mindy and I talked yesterday and she's like, I'm just going to tell people to leave. I'm like, I know, toxic workplace, like, you got to get out. That's the end goal. But it's not always available because of immigration status, because of money in bank account, needing another offer and things like that. What tips do you have for someone who is in one of those more stuck situations to make their life bearable until an exit is possible? Like, do you have any suggestions there?
Well, I mean, it does depend on the situation, right? Is there availability to do some things in this job and in this work environment that still give you a sense of self and a sense of self-love? Can you concentrate on those areas and, kind of compartmentalize and say, hey, I've put a time limit on this. I have to separate this person's interactions, feedback. I have to really put my focus on delivering the best possible work despite them, knowing that work is what's going to show up for the next job. So, I mean, it's much easier to say than do, because these things do hurt us personally. It does feel intentionally purposeful on some people's parts, right? Depending on how toxic bosses or coworkers can be. But, give yourself an out plan, an out strategy, have a date in mind, and just focus on what it's going to take to drive there. And you kind of got to push the rest to the side and say, boy, am I going to enjoy not dealing with this pretty darn shortly.
Yeah, it is tough when you are in. And personally, from the immigration standpoint, so I immigrated from Canada to Ireland and Canada to the US. I've never had the work restriction over my head on my visa though, so I've been very fortunate that way. My husband has, so that stress was all on him. But I think, like, especially for those of you that are in the US, it is difficult, especially if you're on something like an H-1B, which is tied, it's by a lotto once a year. Like, it's not just a matter of going and getting another job, because that is going to change your authorization status. So you have to take that into consideration. There was someone that I actually spoke with on LinkedIn the other day who was in a toxic work environment for the better part of a decade. And he was an immigrant and he ended up being fired from the company because, toxic company, but then he had 30 days to leave the country. And in cases like that, like, make sure that if you have the whatever it is, wherever you are in the world, that you prioritize that, especially in a toxic work environment, because that is going to be what gives you the flexibility. Because I also think that can be amplified on the toxic company side, because they know that you're stuck. They know that they don't have to treat you well. They know that they don't have to worry about you leaving because you have a better offer, because that means that you have to, like, pick up your home and leave. So that is something, like, to also bear in mind. And I think that, like, as Mindy talked about, and like the question that we started with is, how do I avoid landing in these toxic workplaces? Like, that is especially important in those situations where you're really, like, from an immigration, work authorization, where you live perspective, putting your eggs in that basket. Like, take a lot of care when you make those decisions, as exciting as it can be to get what seems like a great opportunity on certain check marks. But if it's not the right check marks, you don't want to be stuck and miserable. And he also had a follow-up question that I wanted to speak to, because I thought that you would have some great insights on this as well. So obviously you've been, helping people get jobs for like 22 years. The follow-up is, so what can you do in the first 1 to 2 months in any workplace to make a good impression when you come in?
Oh, now this is important. And this is important, not only hopefully to set up healthy relationships, but Jennifer, as you have pointed out, if you want to be in a position to be seen, to get promotions, to be a value member of your team, you have to perform well. Of course, you have to perform well, but you do have to be liked. You do have to be seen as a resource. So this is when you ask questions. You do more research. You pay attention to those around you. You do volunteer to help people. Yeah. And, go out of your way to find out what the people around you are doing. Go find out what their jobs are, what their challenges are, what their needs are. And then if something, comes in where you can be like, oh, hey, I can help with that. I've got an idea on that. You are seen as a team player who also is making relationships. So get in there and get to know your coworkers and their challenges and see where you can support. Everybody loves a team player, right? That's number one on everybody's job description. And don't be disingenuous about it. Don't be creepy about it, but make a point of getting to know what's going on. And it also makes your job more fun. You can see the possibilities where you can put your special sauce or your super skills into play. You're only setting yourself up for success, and you're probably going to meet some really cool, fun new people and learn some things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that this also from your perspective bridges through from the job search, because, you help people to identify what they're really looking for and what they're bringing to the table. And that time is also time for them to learn to make sure alignment, but also you need the information in order to provide as much value as possible. And I love that you hit on helping as well, because that is something that is so under discussed in my opinion, because helping other people and asking for help makes you more likable. People like helping. And we always are just trying to do things on our own or show up and make a good impression by knowing all of the things or being so smart. But really people want to help you. And this is also the valid time for you to have no idea what you're doing and to learn about the company and the people that you're working with.
And sometimes you can't help, maybe because you're new and you just got there, or maybe you don't know what they need, but you're listening to them. You are helping them work it out verbally. And that kind of interaction, being that bouncing, what's the term for that? Being something to bounce, that people can bounce ideas off of, helps them work through stuff too. And you can hear them, right? You can listen to their process and be like, ooh, I see how this person's thinking and how they like to work. And then, when I do have a project that's maybe got some legs with them, I'm going to be able to slip in there really smoothly and be like, hey, I get where you're coming from. I can really get in there and start making some impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that one. And I hope that helps you. And again, not saying names because I don't want to out anyone. And just for those of you who are over on YouTube, the live chat, I don't think actually shows up after. And I know a lot of you are anonymous over there. I had this was actually a comment that came in on YouTube just before we got on the live, but I wanted to talk about it because it's a toxic dynamic, just from the surface. Obviously it's a very short comment. And we started chatting about it right before I clicked the go live button, but this is the situation. So my boss will tell me on Monday that all I did last week was not enough. Then on Tuesday, my boss will tell me everything I did last week was freaking incredible. Any tips on how to deal with a bipolar manager? So this manager sounds I'm not sure about the mental issue part, if there's an actual diagnosis, or if it's just a manager who isn't very clear, communicative, consistent, any of those.
And sometimes, you also get people who aren't good managers. And what happens is however they're feeling or whatever input they're getting, and it's usually about them and not you, comes back at you. So you made a point about that in one of your recent videos where, how do you separate their criticism from the reality, right? Because if you know that this person is perhaps a little bit waffly on opinion, That's when you really kind of have to step back and say, now, wait a minute. I know I did good work. What I did over there was good. And maybe what you need to do is counteractive measures, which would be a spreadsheet, right? Where we've got like, hey, here's what I did. Here's how I felt about the outcome of these things. And, if there was some good criticism that can help me level up for next time, great. But otherwise, I'm going to disregard that and do this.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Probably look for a new job if this is something that human being. I mean, everybody has mental health issues, right? We have bad hair days. We have bad mental health issues. It happens. If it's a regular thing that you don't see somebody making a solve towards, and it is not your place to solve that problem for that person, you cannot do that. If this is a regular occurrence, then this manager is not in a position to support you, and you need to go find somebody who's available to do so.
Yeah. I mean, at best, it sounds like they're moody and not able to temper it. And I think that it is one of the manager's responsibilities to provide consistency and to if they're dealing with a whole bunch of ish, to be somewhat of an umbrella so that their team isn't dealing with it. And it sounds like this person is just a sieve. So I think that there's an element of take it from the source. And I also think in those cases of one day they're mad, one day they're not, there's also and someone on LinkedIn, I can't remember who passed me this quote, but and it's my new favorite. Don't assume malice when stupidity will suffice. And it's so true. And this is really probably just a lack of training and professional maturity issue for the person. The thing that I would actually be inclined to do is to find a way to become that person's dopamine dealer. As weird as that sounds. So if they're moody and emotional, how can you be the person that they have positive interactions with? And there's different motivations for different people. But, if you can be the person who is giving them good news, not reacting, because sometimes they're just mad and wanting to take it on in the world. Let's face it, people do that. It's not the right thing to do, but it still happens. But if you're the person who they can consistently come to be uplifted, to feel better, or honestly, even if you're okay with it, to be the person where they can just come and blow some steam and you don't take it personally, decide to be that person. Now, again, there could be a lot more to this if there is actual mental disorder, if you are dealing with a narcissistic manager, if this is a form of manipulation, then that's a very different story. But if this person is just kind of emotional, that's what I would gravitate more towards, because quite honestly, people with high emotionality like that tend to also be people that you can kind of train in your interactions more easily.
But you have to be willing to take that on.
So bad.
You know that you're constantly going to have to kind of gently keep pushing them back up the happier.
It's kind of managing up, right?
It is managing up. And if you're cool with that, but just, know that what's going to happen is they're also going to come over and dump a lot of emotional stuff, and you don't have to take it. You can just, you can just listen. But that's going to happen. They are going to feel comfortable doing that, which is going to open up a new door, and you have to decide if you want to be this person's therapist or not.
Yes. Yeah. But I think even just a baseline, if you look at the dynamic of this person and say, okay, this person's just emotional, maybe not bipolar, they're just emotional. I think even just awareness of that being their dynamic, especially when you see it with other people, can help you depersonalize it when it's happening to you. It is frustrating when you are being giving contradictory feedback, though, because then you don't really know what to action and you have to kind of go on the thing that you do. I like the spreadsheet idea because I think in spreadsheets.
This goes, I think it was you, maybe it was you or somebody else, but recently gave a piece of advice, keep a brag sheet. I call it a brag sheet at all times. And every week, every day, every time you do a project or have an encounter or whatever that you decided was successful, because you're going to forget, you go put that on your sheet. And you remind yourself on the regular, the value that you have been providing, where you have been winning, Maybe you keep a needs work section. Is that, how's that going? But I think it's really important that you constantly recognize where you're at and give yourself your own feedback on that, and not really maybe depend on that so much for others. Because like with this person, if they truly are bipolar or having some emotional and mental health issues, this isn't about you.
Absolutely.
And so you kind of got to do that for yourself. Like I did an interview once where it was very clear that they were flagging a toxic work environment, because the question was to me, do you need reassurance or congratulations from a hiring manager on doing a good job? Or are you okay with them basically only coming at you when there's an issue? And I was like, wow, that's an interesting question. Because first of all, I am an adult who's feels pretty confident in her skills. And no, I don't need you to sit around and pat me on the back all day. But on the other hand, if I'm only going to hear from you when there's a problem, that's not collaboration, and that's not what I'm looking for. And what that says to me is I'm going to let you drown. I'm going to let you drown, right? And I'm just like,
but you know what you just inadvertently hit on is how subjective this is as well. Because if I hear that, I'm like, great, that's exactly what I want.
Oh, you're like
that is my ideal management situation. Like, I know what I'm pretty self-aware. I tend to know it does well. Like, there's numbers and stuff behind it, but like, I want to know when there's something that can be better, and I don't get offended, and as long as it's delivered in the right way and like without malice intent and stuff like that. But again, because this is something that I talk about a lot on my channel as well, on the theme of bad managers, someone has asked, how do you deal with a toxic ex-boss giving you bad reviews? Like, they don't personally, but they're trying to like contact through back channels. So like, what do you do when you do have someone out there, especially from like a job search perspective, that's out there trashing you?
Well, first of all, depending on what state and or country you're in, if you can get any kind of evidence of that, that is quite illegal. And they can get in quite a bit of trouble, and you can probably just stroll through with a cease and desist and be like, let's not go to legal over this. The other thing that you do is a counter campaign, right? Where you get as many good visible recommendations going on as you can, those recommendations on LinkedIn, and make them specific, not just a recommendation. Have them sing about your specific special powers, whatever you feel that those are, what would appeal to a new employer that you're targeting. If you do have, I don't know if you can engage perhaps other coworkers and just maybe, engage help. I don't know. Do you have some other suggestions?
I like that you touched on finding other referrals, like, because I think I've had clients that have dealt with this as well, where like, usually when we think of references, especially in a job search situation, we think of managers because they're managing you and supervising your work. But coworkers, clients, partners that you work with, anyone that you work with closely can provide social proof for your awesomeness. And I have found this to be very helpful in kind of offsetting and giving context to toxic work situations. Because in a job interview, you do not want to be like, you can't talk to my boss because they're a toxic AF person. Like, it's not going to make them look bad. It's going to make you look bad. Highly agree on especially depending on where you are. Like, I know in Canada, you cannot say anything bad about anyone legally in a pre-employment reference, whether it's on the books or if it's a back channel. Like, I know the back channel ones happen. The other thing is, if you have a separation agreement and you have a dual non-disparagement agreement, that would also put them into breach of that contract. So that is also something to take a look at, especially if there's other things like NDAs that haven't been compartmentalized. So an employment lawyer can help you with that. But this is also something that I think makes your job search tweak around building relationships also very important, because if you can establish a level of trust and someone can see you and what you're bringing forward really well, that you can get to the level of like, my ex-manager and I don't have a great relationship. I did everything that I can, but sometimes when they I have heard that they're saying negative things about me. And just, if you hear anything, I would love for you to just let me know so we can have the opportunity to discuss. but yeah, I would, slander, like, you're not allowed in most places to prevent someone from having a livelihood. And especially if the things that they're saying are not true, then this is America. Lawsuits are a thing. If that's the road that you want to go, but definitely talk to an employment lawyer in that case.
And you usually don't have to go to legal. Usually if you flag this, and more importantly, flag this for the company owners, right? Not just say, hey, this is an illegal practice that one of your people is participating in, and for obvious reasons, we need that to stop. Yeah. Usually that is the end of the deal. I have had a couple of people who, for unfortunate reasons, had to put through sexual harassment suits. Yeah. And part of sexual harassment suits is that no one's allowed to talk about it after. Unfortunately, we know that is not true. And if you are in a small enclosed environment, people will talk. So again, what you have to do is really water your relationships and your advocates and get more people out there saying nice things than hopefully the one human who is not. And I honestly, when I'm doing references, I'll be like, yeah, I want to hear from a supervisor or two, but I am equally or more interested in hearing from your peers.
Yeah. I also think that employers also need to do their job of, there is obviously the dynamic of the references that you give are of course going to be good. So they like to find back channels to validate the real information. But I also think that if someone is just giving an atrocious amount of feedback that's completely contradictory to other references and the perception that you have, you also have to consider the quality of that, because it just might not be there.
What's the motivation of the source, right? What is the motivation of that source? What's going on over there? And it's interesting because there's the good news for some of you might be that a lot of places are starting to do away with references, because honestly, unless it's an accident, 9 times out of 10, you are giving references that are only going to say good things about you. So the whole reference process is kind of being started to look at with a grain of salt for sure. Yeah. So that should help. But yeah, there are some people who feel the need to go out of their way. And usually what happens is you do see it biting them in the ass sooner rather than later. So go on your campaign and just be ready for them to be served at some point.
Karma is definitely a thing, but having a containment strategy, like Mindy talked about, is important.
Yeah, I love that PR. You introduced that to me on when is it, I think maybe it was 2 weeks ago. You had the video on toxic fellow coworkers and how to counteract them, and you're like, go on a PR strategy, and I was like, oh yes, that's yes. Always be on a PR strategy for yourself because
there was actually, before we hopped on, I was checking through comments, and someone had said, we can't even it was, I think, a comment on my video about exit interviews. And they're like, we can't even be honest. This is why companies are toxic. It's not a matter of being honest. It's a matter of, you can have a positive perspective or you can have a negative perspective. And not only can you internally have one of those or somewhere in between, you can also project those different realities outward, because everything is subjective. So if you are going to go and say, I left my job and my boss was toxic and he's trash talking me, again, does this make you look good or bad? Now, it depends on the relationship that you have. But if you can position it in a way where it's this person, I didn't leave on the greatest of terms. I was the top performer and they really were not happy. I didn't accept the retention package that was offered. And now they're, I have heard that they're saying negative things about me. And I just want you to have that context and let me know, there's a different way of saying things. And again, we're not making things up. We're not saying things that aren't true. It's just a matter of how you package and present that to people. That's what really matters. Yes. There's a very interesting question that came in over on LinkedIn. And this is it sounds like from a manager's perspective. So how do you help align an employee when they have a bad attitude? Because employees can create toxic work environments.
Right.
So if you're that angry person coming in, you can poison the team.
Now, interestingly enough, I have been in more situations where I had toxic coworkers than bosses.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was the boss, but 9 times out of 10, it was a coworker that was making everybody else's life hell. And that is tricky because if you are not the boss, you can go to the boss and say, hey, I need your help. But 9 times out of 10, they just don't want to be bothered. If enough stuff is meeting completion goals for them, they're going to be like, work it out. That's between you.
Yeah.
Right. So, but managing somebody who is behaving toxically, I would hope, or I would like that someone sets up the communication channel, gives them concise examples of what's going on and how it's impacting people and how it makes you feel. And, you don't accuse people. You say, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, so I would like to have this conversation. I'm going to assume that you're not aware of this because I don't think you would want to make people feel like this, right? And then they're like, oh, yes, no, I don't want to make people. And they're like, well, this is what's going on. Let's try some other ways. This is a communication issue. This is a, and then see if you can actually give them some tools to approach in a better way and set up regular check-ins. Let them know there is going to be accountability. You may have to retrain behavior, which they are either going to be willing to do, or they're going to say, no, it's not my problem. It's their problem. And, their truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? There's got to be 2 to play ball. But, you have to decide as a manager, you actively have to try. You have to try. I really strongly believe you owe this person that. To try and help them change their behavior and be a better employee, right? That's what as managers, we are there to do. But if you give it a good go and you kind of put them on a management plan for improvement and they can't make it, it may be time to manage them out because your whole team is not worth losing over one person. This is a team. We are coming together to make something bigger. If we could do this by ourselves, we would, right? We are purposely signing up to go work with each other. So play nice here, get the F out.
Yeah, I totally agree on coaching people. And we talk about it in terms of like when we're dealing with a toxic coworker or dealing with a toxic manager, like what's often behind that is there's insecurity, there's lack of confidence, there's fear. Like no one wants to go and be the horrible person in everyone's day. No one wants to be the toxic coworker on the team, but there's reasons that lie behind it. So I think like if you can connect with them to like try to spot that and see if there is ways to nurture them, get them resources, suggest great books, suggest like my video, how to have a positive attitude at work. There is resources out there for people, but also like, don't be afraid of having those direct conversations, because I think as a manager, I would rather have an uncomfortable conversation that gives someone the opportunity to succeed versus beating around the bush and having them fail in the role or having them destroy the team. And they're going to fail in the role because I'm not going to keep them if they're toxic. Most managers won't, but it is really hard because you do need to contain it. And also like, I'm not so much one for team building exercises and stuff like that, but sometimes there are more specific interpersonal issues or there is some sort of misalignment between people. So, sometimes I know as a manager, that's not what you want to be or who you want to be, but you can also, if there's that person is being toxic towards a specific person and pulling people into it from either direction, then you can say like, I have spotted this issue between you two. And you two need to work together to figure it out. And you're going to bring me an action plan to tell me how you're going to work together to have this stop.
Yeah, no, we're adults. You can certainly put that on people.
Adults,
And the other thing I would flag is if you're having a problem with this person and behavior has changed, right? Is it a mental health issue?
This is like also, yes.
People are not consistently one thing. And sometimes we are doing better than we are at other times. Does that person need a break? Does your company offer leave? Is that something that you can help identify this human that they need to take?
Employee assistance plans, like, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is, especially right now, I know a lot of people have
Oh,
been
yeah.
struggling, and, fuses are short, and, it's a reality, and you can really be there to support people through that, or just, again, and especially if they have communicated that they are suffering from anxiety, they're suffering from depression or something like that, and that is a factor in their behavior, you don't want to let someone go because
Yeah,
of a
people
mental
are not
disorder. Like, that's kind of
yeah.
illegal.
Well, people are also
Um,
not disposable, right? And sometimes we're at our best and sometimes we're not. And, being that good, empathetic human that can turn around and say, hey, I've noticed that, things are changed, or you may be at somewhere a little bit different right now. What can I do to support that? Are you okay? And I
yeah.
feel like a lot of people have been bottling up the last year to a year and a half, right? We're just waiting, right? We're waiting for someone to say, it's going to be okay. And now that message is starting to get out there, all those feelings, all that stuff you have not addressed for the last year to a year and a half may come out in weird ways. So if people are seeing some particularly weird behavior right now, we're seeing some stress let down, right? And it's going to come out some wacky ways.
Yes. It's going
Hopefully
to be
just
really interesting seeing what happens as we get back to the office as well. Because as we come back to the office, a lot of the issues that have been non-issues are going to resurface. And again, pair that with the trauma of what everyone has been through in the past year. And I think that work dynamics might have the potential to be intense. So I think especially for managers or aspiring leaders, this is something for you. And even for those of you who are preparing to go back to work, and we'll probably be, Mindy, I'm sure you're going to be talking about it more. I'll definitely be talking about it more as well. So someone over on LinkedIn, and again, I'm not putting up names, so I'm trying to acknowledge you without acknowledging you. But there was another great question, and this actually, I saw the comment come in when we were talking about making that good first impression in a job. So it's when we're starting a new job, never say, that's not my job. Actually, never do that. Haha. Be an ally with other departments. But what advice do you have if you know you can help in other areas, are capable, but they want you to stay in your lane?
Ooh, well, I mean, it is a fine line, right? Because you don't want to be like, I'm going after your job, because that's, that can be very threatening. You are definitely want to go in there and say, what can I do? I'm like, I want to know about your job so I can support you, right? I want to know about your job so I can support you, see how it plays into mine, understand how the process works so that when I am needed, however I'm needed, I'm able to jump in.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily trying to, take things from them or hop in on their project, but just saying, hey, I just want to be aware of you, your needs, what's going on here. So when you do need me, you can yell and I can come screaming, ready to go with whatever you need to do. Because that way you're also not asking for an investment on them or taking away from them. You're just like, what can I do to be ready for you? And people will be like, well, I might not need anything right now, but let me tell you how this works, right? Which is very helpful for you and them.
Yeah, no, and again, going back to that helping, can you show me? I'm really interested and you do this so well. Can you show me? Can I help? Can I help once you show me? So if you get them helping you and then reciprocate with helping. Sometimes it depends on the personality and the source behind the protectionism. Some people are feeling protectionist because they feel that their job is at risk, or some people are just like me, they're just big control freaks. There's all these different motivations. So figuring out what is behind that for them. But I do love the suggestion of offering
that is a good one though. How do you support a control freak? How do you feel supported? If you're like, I don't necessarily want you in my stuff, but you still want a supportive teammate. So how do you ride that line?
Yeah, this is a hard one for me to answer because I feel like I'm also just such a weirdo if I'm not looking for any external validation and stuff like that. So I'm the person who always would be like, hey, I need help when needed. I had to feel comfortable though at different points in my career. If I was transitioning roles, I got a promotion, I needed to feel comfortable passing things off. That was a big process. I think that we would be here for another hour if we really got into that. But it's an internal, like, there's nothing that, because of me and the way that I personally am, there was nothing that anyone outside could do. Like, I just needed to be in the pain or the point of realization that I needed to hand it off and that it would be okay. And really that's a matter of like building up your trust in other people. I also, my anxiety shows up by being a control freak. So some of this is also, if my anxiety is not in check, there's no way like this is related to that.
Yeah.
So
that's a good one. If you are dealing with someone who's like, no, try later, right? Maybe they're not in a space where they feel confident in you yet. Maybe you need to be around a little bit longer. Maybe they
have deadlines and like getting help takes longer sometimes. There's all those dynamics.
Just pleasantly show up and be like, hey, if you need me, I'm here. If you don't need me, that's fine too, right? Take the pressure off, but leave the door open. Would you like that if someone approached you in that way and said, hey, you look like you got it all covered, but if you need something, please scream. And if you ever want to share a little bit more about what you're doing I'm very interested in learning. You let me know. We can leave it in there.
All right. I have another question that came in from YouTube. This is a longer, and it looks like it might be in a couple of comments. So I'm going to try to get them together. So let's see. I came to my boss and told her one of the ladies I work with is rude. Her response to me was that it's because she's the firstborn child and because she's from up north. So like birth order plus culture.
Okay.
Interesting response.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next day, another partner from a different department literally told her the same thing, and she relayed the same thing to them. It's so annoying. I told my boss I'm not expecting to be friends with her, but for her to speak with respect. I've seen her be rude with customers as well. My boss is well aware of her behavior and has admitted like how she's still there. This is so frustrating. And Mindy, let's get your take before I like go off on this one.
So basically you've got a manager who doesn't like confrontation and who doesn't want to manage. So that's not something you can fix. You can suggest things to them and say, hey, maybe this person isn't aware. Maybe we could do some exercises for the whole team. We don't have to make it look like just them. And of course, we're managing up here, right? And we are giving possible solves to this person. Depending on how easy it is for you to get another role, you can also kind of let them know, hey, this is not the environment that I signed up for and that I am interested in working in. So are we doing something about this? Lay it out there. But of course, know that you might be ready for them to go, no, I'm not going to do anything about this. And maybe you should go, right? So if you're going to lay that line in the sand, be ready to back it up by walking or providing another role accordingly. But you can either choose to help them manage up, or you can just say, okay, I don't have a manager in this case, and I'm going to take myself and my skills and my personal business to somewhere that can provide that for me.
Yeah. I've also seen where managers have tried to manage those people. Maybe it's not in their authority or their power to make a decision surrounding if that person stays at a company. So like, or there might be things that you don't see happening behind the scenes. And that's something that I always like for people to keep in mind as well. And this actually, I think, feeds into like another question or comment that I saw here was, about this person. They're like, there's 16 people at work. There's one toxic coworker, not easy. I don't want to quit. If there's the one person, the more that you can compartmentalize yourself from dealing with them. Like, I know it's frustrating, especially when it's like a rude coworker and they're being rude to like, it's one thing internally, quite honestly, like be rude to your internal customers, not cool. You shouldn't have to put up with that. But it happens. Like no one is going to be like the best person to work with. Like, there's always going to be the one person,
Yes.
So it is frustrating. And I think especially when you're very customer service oriented, when you see a customer being mistreated, that is something that, is really hard to deal with. But that's a decision of the business. And if it's not in your authority to change it, then it's a matter of, can you choose to care less about it? Because it's not impacting you, or, make it impact you as little as possible and just continue to like talk to your manager in the cases that it does. Like if that person is being rude to a customer, and then you have to deal with the angry customer, then talk to your manager, because like this person is being rude. I have elevated this. In future, would you like me to bring those customers who complain to you? Because if they're not having to deal with it, then maybe it's not an issue for them. But if you make it a them issue, maybe there's a little bit of incentive, because that person shouldn't be causing work for you. So there's like, again, there's a little bit more on kind of surface level discussion, but you can really dive in there.
I like you're going to share in this experience so that you
let's relish it together.
pop it to the side and say that's not important. And unfortunately, like there's that other thing. A lot of people have to have an experience, like, you know, that we call it the hot stove touch, right? A lot of people have to touch the hot stove. And they're like, oh, that's hot. And you're like, I've been telling you that's hot for 6 months. They're like, yeah, I didn't get it. So I love that. Pass it on and have them experience it so they can be like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't what we want to be doing. And maybe I should get in there and do something about that. Yeah,
absolutely. The toxic coworkers, if you're in a small office, can be more complicated because there might not be any escaping. I think then it's a matter of, again, what type of toxic coworker do you have? Is there a way to neutralize them? You know, and it's going to be different if you're dealing with like a narcissistic coworker who's jealous of you. It's going to be really different than someone who's just kind of a very low professional maturity and gossips a lot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like boundaries are very helpful in that instance.
Yeah. And some people are missing pieces. Let's just, you know, let's be frank. Some people are missing pieces. Some people are not good communicators. Some people are not very mature in certain areas. Some people do not have strong common sense, but maybe they have this really fabulous skill over here. So, you know, it's always worth at least once trying to talk to someone too and say, hey, you know, I've noticed this. I'm having this experience. You know, it's not something that's I'm really enjoying or is working for me. I've noticed, you know, in these situations, if I do this, I get a better outcome. You can always try and be supportive and helpful. There is a possibility that that human being just doesn't get it. And if you can lay it out in a way, they might get it. Always try, right? And if they're still just like, nope, I'm going to do my ass backwards, whatever, then you're like, great, I'm going to ignore you and walk on and make you my manager's issue because this is just not within my control.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great question came in over on LinkedIn. So what about when you work somewhere where there's no room for growth and you feel stuck where you are because every time you apply for jobs, you're either too qualified or not qualified enough?
Ooh, either too qualified or not qualified enough.
Sitting in the in-between.
My apologies. There's a little human at the door. 1 second. My dad looks like he has her done. But yeah, that is, you know, that's a tricky one. And it's if you're consistently getting that feedback, it's not, I don't think, a matter of your actual level. It's how you are communicating it to the person on the other end. Yeah. So you may need to look at how you're positioning yourself, and you may need to rebrand or reevaluate or push certain skills up, maybe put ones down a little bit, and really cater more towards the individual. And honestly, if you can get somebody on the phone, if this is just an email response, this will not help you. But if you're getting to the first or even the second interview and then getting this response, here's an interview style that I recommend that can help the two of you really connect and meet or not pretty early on. Is I like to say to people, hey, I see that you've got this job description. I've read this. I've been given this. You've got my resume. That's great. But what are you really trying to do? What are your 3-month goals, your 6-month goals, your 9-month goals? What are your 3 biggest problems? You know, and get them to give you the job description and do this early in the interview, right? I see you, you see me, but really what are you trying to do here? And then you can spend the rest of the interview tying your experience to their specific needs. Because then it's not a question of, are you too senior, are you too junior? It's, can you collaborate with me and start thinking about problem solving on my level? Can you partner? And then just the rest of that's not a conversation. You can still be aspirational, you can still be light in areas, but if somebody sees that you are interested in meeting them where they are and helping them with their goals, they're going to be a lot more bought into you, and the rest of that's kind of be a moot point.
Yeah, no, and I love that suggestion because like I think so often like job seekers, it's like, oh, like I'll just tell them and they'll figure out like if I'm the right person. And it's like, no, because it's harder for them to figure you out and what you're great at and your skills and experience and everything that you're bringing to the table than it is for you to figure out their job. Especially because it is going to be pretty specific in terms of what they're actually hiring for. I mean, like values and vision and all of that stuff, like is also very important. But like the more that you understand the opportunity, you're going to spot the things that they can't spot. And you're going to be able to also create a need which you can uniquely fill. Also, another thing is like if you're somewhere where your growth is capped, and I know that some people are like, no, never do extra work. Like if you're not getting the promotion, you're not getting the title, you're not getting the money, don't do the job. Do the job. Start doing the job and put it all on your resume. Because the title doesn't matter as much as the experience. And if you're bringing receipts that that's the level that you're at, or you're getting the experience is for you to get out the door and get that job that pays better. And you're going to get, the money will show up and you're going to get more money for it when you leave the company because a promotion pays less than a job change.
Yep. And you are trying to
like I should drop a microphone.
Right? I say this to people all the time. I don't care what the title is. I don't care if there's an extra 5 or 10K. Are you learning what you need to be able to go to the next level that you want to go to? Are you stimulated? Are you getting things out of this that you can turn around and say to someone else, hey, I want to do more of this over here. I can help you build. That is the most important thing. And if you're not in a place where you're stimulated and you're getting that, you're not going to do a great job, which means you're going to do a mediocre job. You're going to have mediocre offerings, and it's going to be harder to move up to that next level because you're not showing up all the way.
Yeah. Now, on this note, because we're also getting to about time, so we've gotten through quite a bit of questions. If you guys have them and we haven't got them, feel free to drop them into the comments on the video, either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and I'll do my best to come in and answer. But Mindy, do you have something to help job seekers say on your website?
Why, yes, I do have a website, insidejobagency.com, and there's some fun stuff on there. I've got some blogs talking about, gender wage gap, how to go after a job, even if you don't see it posted. Because remember, at least 60% of job descriptions are completely incorrect. So I think you are going to be better served by figuring out who your market is, where you want to be in it, doing your research like we talked about here in the beginning, and getting out there and, sussing that out. Is this viable for me? But I've got all kinds of fun things on there, and there is a free guide on getting your resume through online application systems, because there are a couple of tricks to it, as well as making what I like to call outcome-oriented resumes. I want to hear your outcomes. I want to hear your special stories. I'm not interested in your job description. I can go read that on the company website.
100%. Awesome. I love that. So if you are watching on YouTube, if you scroll into the description, I have linked Mindy's YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you are watching this and you love what Mindy has to say because she's an awesome human being who's super duper smart, go and subscribe to her channel. It's like a long link because she doesn't have 100 subscribers yet. But if we get her 100 subscribers, then she can make it Mindy.
And I can have a cool link.
So let's get her findability.
And for those of you on LinkedIn, if you have not checked out Jennifer, either her LinkedIn feed or her YouTube channel, she is serving it up on the regular. I have never gotten so many actual actionable practices to put in place for problems that we are all having. So check it out. And I believe you have a very cool program coming up, do you not?
I do. We'll be talking more about that later, though. So all of these people here,
we're
or
not
most of the people here, are going to have to listen to it anyway. Also in the YouTube description, quick note. So Mindy also posts on LinkedIn daily fire videos. She's like my spirit animal. Like, this is why we're friends. She just has amazing content and amazing insights and amazing advice. So go and follow her there if you are a LinkedIn person as well. And you also had a video that you asked me, or you said like to link. So I also dropped that into the description, and that was about finding the right job for you, if I am remembering correctly.
Even if you don't see it posted out there, we're going to go matchmake on our own.
Awesome. So as we're wrapping up, if you're on YouTube, scroll down, find that video, give it a watch, give her a subscribe. And, you can drop questions for Mindy there as well. I'm sure she'll answer them. And Mindy, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited. Like, I feel like we had so many questions that we didn't get to. I might have to call you back. We might have to do this again. So also let us know if we should make this a thing sometimes.
This is some tricky troubleshooting. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mindy. Thank you, everyone who joined in. We shall see you next time. Bye.
All right, thanks.